Welcome back, Karate Ninjas. In the last video, we got introduced to the Karate framework, what it is and why it's such a powerful tool for API testing. Now, it's time to roll up our sleeves and actually write some tests using Karate's Gherkin-style syntax. Let's jump right in. 1. Feature files and scenarios. Every Karate test starts with a feature file. This is where you describe your test in plain English. Each feature file represents a test suite, and inside it, you'll have one or more scenarios. Each scenario is like an individual test case. Let's look at an example. Now, let's break this down. The line feature, User API Tests, is like the title of your test suite. It tells you what this file is all about. In this case, we're testing the user API. Then we have scenario, Get User by ID. This is one specific test. It checks whether we can retrieve user details using their ID. Given URL sets the base URL or endpoint for the request. When method get means we're sending a GET request to that URL. Finally, then status 200 verifies that the response status code is 200, meaning the request was successful. Simple, clean, and human readable, even non-programmers can understand it. 2. The keywords. Karate uses the same Gherkin keywords that Cucumber does. Given, when, then, and asterisk. Think of them like this. Given keyword sets up what needs to happen before the test, like URL or headers. When keyword describes the action, usually the API call. Then keyword checks the result. And keyword continues a step to add more details. And there's also the wildcard asterisk. It can replace any of the above for cleaner code. Here's an example. First, we set the endpoint. Then we define the request body using the request keyword. Here, we're creating a JSON object with name and age. Next, the when method post sends a post request to create the user. And once we get the response, then status 201 confirms that the user was successfully created. Finally, and match response.name == John verifies that the API actually returned the correct name. Notice how natural that reads. It's almost like English sentences that just happen to test your APIs. 3. Running .feature files. Once you've written your feature file, how do you run it? Well, there are two ways. You can run it directly from your IDE, like IntelliJ or VS Code. Or, if you're using Maven, just type this command. Behind the scenes, you'll have a small Java runner file, something like this. This file simply tells Karate to execute the user's .feature test. That's it, Karate takes care of the rest. 4. Assertions using match. Here's where the real magic happens, assertions. In Karate, you use the match keyword to verify that the response matches your expectations. For example, then match response.status == active. And match response.age == 30. This checks that the response has a field called status with the value active. And another field called age with the value 30. You can even compare entire JSON objects directly. Karate also allows partial matches using wildcards like #string or #number. For instance, this means I don't care what the exact values are, just make sure ID is a number and name is a string. That's flexible validation, perfect for real-world APIs where data can change dynamically. 5. Variables and the def keyword. Sometimes, you'll need to store and reuse values between steps. Like capturing a user ID from one API and using it in another. For that, Karate gives us the def keyword. Example. Here's what's happening. We're grabbing the user ID from the previous response and saving it into a variable called user ID. Then we're using that variable to call the next API, fetching details of that exact user. You can define strings, numbers, JSON objects, or even entire functions using def. It's just like declaring variables in JavaScript. In the next video, we'll dive into working with APIs.